and thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited to be here, and I think it's quite interesting to come after Veidekke and Skanska, because I think if you heard really carefully what they were saying and what I will show you now, I would say you were pretty good off in design management. But you have to accumulate all three presentations, then it's getting quite interesting. And it's also showing that I think there's a track in the development of how to do design management that's quite interesting, because you're going to see a lot of similarities in my presentation as what you saw before. So my name is Niels Treldal. I'm an engineer at a company called Raboll in Denmark. I was a mechanical engineer first, then I was a project manager. Now I'm doing a PhD together with Raboll, and this is some of the stuff that we're presenting, working on. So just a few words about Raboll if you don't know us. We are an engineering consulting company doing a range of different services, buildings, transport, water and energy and so on, and are growing into quite a large company within in the last 20 years especially. So almost 13,000 people now, and also almost all over the world. So we acquired a company called Environ in the US. It's an environmental consulting company a few years ago. So they are all the green countries, and we were all the blue countries before. And I think it's one of the interesting things here is that no matter where you go within Raboll, the challenges for design management are the same. So it seems like it should be a universal challenge that we are facing. So it also calls for some universal solutions. Just to set out why are we doing this, you've probably seen this before. So that's the productivity of construction, the red one, and productivity of manufacturing is the green one, and from ranging from 1994 until today. So what you see is that the productivity in manufacturing has almost doubled in that period, where it's more or less stayed flat in construction. And there's many reasons for that. But if you look into a lot of research, one of the key elements that show up is poor design quality, and that's causing delays in the construction site, causing budget overruns, and so on. So it's an issue, and it's a huge issue. And why do we have poor design quality? Well, if you look into research on that one, a lot of the research says poor design management and relationships between the people in the project. And I think that the funny thing is that it was the same in 1994, and Ergo showed us last year that it's the same again still. So not much has changed, and I think we need an approach to this. There's another thing to it, I think, as well, and that's the complexity of doing building design. So I think we actually have increased productivity in construction. It's just getting much more complex, so we have to do a lot more design coordination than before. So if you look in 100 years ago, a building was a very simple thing. But today, and also with the pressure of environmental requirements for buildings and so on, you see that a huge part of the building cost and also the quantities, they go into mechanical systems now, and these mechanical systems have to be quite intelligent to work together with the building and the users. So when we review, when we ask our project managers what is the challenge for our design teams, or for managing design teams, they say lack of coordination, we don't have the right resources, and there's too many changes. And then they also say something else. This is way too complex for me to run around and tell everybody what they have to do. I need a team that does the right things without me telling them all the time what they have to do. So these self-managed teams are getting more and more important, because it's so complex to understand this building. So if everybody is not working together on this one, collaborative design, then it's not going to work. So that's kind of like the challenge. Then we looked into what can be part of the solution. And there's definitely lean, but there's also another similar approach called agile. And agile is basically coming out of the software development industry, whereas lean is mostly streaming out of production. Just a few words about what people see as the benefits of using agile. So this is 4,000 people around the world being asked who's using agile working methods. What do you experience in when you work with agile? So they say we are better at manage changing priorities, and then there's a lot about the team. So team productivity, visibility, and understanding the project, and then an increased team moral or motivation. And another interesting thing with Lean, to explain it very shortly, is like they always say, fail fast and fail often, which is the idea of it's okay to fail as long as you learn from your fails and mistakes, and then in the next iteration you're going to do, you will learn from that and do something better. So now this is the theme was Lean, so I just thought I'd highlight a few differences between Lean and Agile. First of all, there's not much, because they're stemming out of the same idea. So Agile is based on Lean principles. So the goal of each method is to deliver and maximize the value in the project. Whereas Lean is focusing on this continuous workflow, Agile is more focusing on this iterative workflow, in order to embrace the changes and learn from it. So this is just an illustration of, so Lean was streaming out of the manufacturing industry, and then it was adopted by the construction industry. Agile was coming from a need in the software development companies that there was too much waterfall planning, and they wanted to be more adaptive to what the users to what the users was presented to, and adapt to the feedback from the users in a better way. But in the end, I think they are very close. However, I think that it's interesting for construction design that it is an iterative process compared to construction. So I think it's interesting to be a little bit more on the Agile side than on the Lean side when we talk about construction design. So that's the task of this one. We're focusing on the design task in our building projects. So what did we do? Well, basically, we realized that most all project managers in design, they have all these Excel sheets with all the tasks that has to be done by different people, and then they try to manage. And as I try, so maybe that was not the right one. Let's do like this. So they define the task here. Who is it for? Who should do something? And this is kind of like a status. And Excel is awful for managing something like this. Probably most of you tried it. So we wanted to move into something different, and that was where we identified that from this Agile principles, there's a range of tools that can help us in an online environment to support all this task management. So we selected a tool called Jira. There's other tools like some of the Treldal one as well. I think it's very important to remember that design management for just a medium-sized project is not about managing 10 tasks. It's about managing a lot more tasks. So, for example, Trello is very confined in how much you can actually manage in one place. And that's why a tool like Jira is better, because it can manage quite a lot of tasks at the same time. So essentially, what we did was that we moved all of this task management into a system, but this system also allows us to do a continuous prioritization of the tasks. So before, it was very difficult that if we realized that based on what we talked to the client, that we need to change something, we need to design it differently, and we need to focus on other stuff. It was really complicated to then move some lines in Excel up. Here in Jira, you can basically drag and drop tasks. And the rule is always that the task on top is the most important one, and then you continuously prioritize your tasks. So this is how it basically looks, and all of these weird words are stemming out of this Agile world. We chose like within Lean, there's different methods. In Agile, there's also different methods. We choose something called Agile Scrum. Scrum is a good way if you need to prioritize a lot of tasks continuously. So that's why we use Scrum. And Scrum is basically about defining all your tasks and then putting them into sprints. So say we need to do this chunk of tasks now, and then we, in order to achieve some goal, and then we, based on that sprint, we will evaluate the outcome and figure out what should we do. Should we follow the plan, or should we adjust the plan based on what we just learned? And so So there's this is called backlog prioritization. You prioritize your task, and then you have this sprint view. So that's the ongoing sprint. That's the sprint you're in right now, where tasks can then transition from different stages, depending on where they are in the design workflow. And basically, this is a powerful tool to understand what are we doing, and every time, hopefully, all these tasks have then moved to the end, which means that they are completed. And then after each sprint, you will of course meet in your design team and evaluate. So, what was the outcome? Did we complete everything in time? What are we missing information? And what did we learn? And how should we then adjust the backlog based on what we learned? And that's basically the case. Of course, you can get a whole lot of, because it's now in an online tool, you can get a whole lot of graphs or KPIs and so on, illustrating how your project is progressing. And I think the one that our teams use the most is this one, because it shows you how many tasks have been created and how many have been resolved. So if the gap is increasing too rapidly and the two lines are not following each other, this team is in a challenge, because there's many assumptions apparently in the project because they're not solving things. And the other thing is, of course, that yeah, and that's about it. And I think the other thing, this is like Facebook. You have a activity stream, so you can see what's going on in the project. And I think one of the feedback feedback from many of the project participants are that it's interesting for them not just to see their own tasks in this system, but they can also see what everybody else is doing, and they can get an understanding of where the project is going, and they can get an understanding of why they're doing what they do, because they can see what other people need from them and so on. So there's a better understanding in the project of what's going on, and then of course they can do this continuous prioritization based on what they're learning along the way. We also found that just using a tool, putting a lot of tasks into a list is not sufficient. That was also what was presented before, because especially engineers, if you just say, are you happy, do you need anything? No, I'm okay. So you need to get them up, you need to get them active, and what we do right now is that we basically print out, generate small cards. You can see the small cards here of everything that is already in Jira. We put it on the wall, and then based on, so this is the sprints, and then people can stand on that wall and reprioritize whatever they're doing. Are we doing it in the right way? They can also add tasks if they need to, and we will then update the Jira afterwards. So basically I think it's very interesting, this one, because we always have a challenge that visual planning is a perfect tool because you get people engaged, but what usually happens is that everybody just takes a photo of it and yes, it's going to be a beautiful project, and then they go back and do what they think is important, and they forgot all about these relations between tasks and so on. So now we have a way to capture that because, again, we don't create all the relations, so we do not define that this task is dependent on this and this, but we define it, we prioritize so that the ones on top are the most important, and then at least we can manage on that, because these relationships, they will change, and the importance of each task will change during the project as these design iterations are running. And then the next part is so that board, and it's pretty analog procedure. So right now we're actually building a new room in Raboll. We call it a collaboration studio, I think it's going to be. And the idea is that we're going to have this a long wall. It's going to be 6.5 meters long, which is going to be a touch-sensitive wall with some projectors on it, so it knows where your hand are. And there's a tool with like digital post-its. And we're now working with the supplier to kind of like link our everyday tasks with this digital board. So you can basically say like, so you're managing your everyday work here, but now and then you take the entire design team and you can then basically flip all the tasks in here, or the type of task that you're interested in coordinating today. And they can then prioritize it on this big wall, because here size really matters. It is important. There's a lot of tasks in design. And it's important you have a big wall for that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see this digital link, because it's going to fix one of the challenges of using Excel, it's time consuming to manage all of this. Hopefully we'll speed up that process. Another thing is very important is that if you just ask people to define tasks, they can. There's a lot of different type of tasks, and you need to manage them differently. Otherwise, you're gonna drown in managing hundreds of tasks. So we created different type of tasks, clarification issues with the client, changes towards the client, but also these coordination tasks between design teams and so on. So you basically create this, and I think that the interesting part is that if depending on what kind of task you define, you will be asked to fill in different type of information. So if it's a change, you will need to fill in what is the effect on time and cost. But if it's just a clarification issue, you will not need to fill in all this information. You just need to fill in when is this applicable and who has to do something. Because then behind this is some workflows. So the system will automatically understand if you have a clarification. There's a workflow of how to manage this task to ensure that it's been solved. Or first of all, that somebody is paying attention to it, and secondly, that somebody is solving it and somebody is evaluating that it's okay. And then if you have a change, of course you include at different levels. So there's a client approval stage here, so that changes are not running through the project without managing should we incorporate a change or not. So this kind of system is supporting everything that Vejdirektoratet and Skanska, I think, is doing in a digital way, and I think it's definitely the software industry has been very successful in this. And I think the interesting part here is this dynamic approach to it, so you can actually very easily also reprioritize your tasks. Some nice guys did an open source tool, so there's actually you can sit inside Revit, you can open up a small plugin, and will actually connect straight into this activity management software. So you can sit in here and say, okay, I need this rating to be higher. I can see that. Create the issue, and it will jump straight into the software package. It also has BCF import, so if you do this class detection in Solibri and you generate a BCF report of what has to be done, you can import that as well. Because it's not making any sense that you only manage some of your tasks in this system. You have to prioritize. You have a team, and that's usually a fixed number of people, but you need to prioritize what should they do in order to complete the sprints. What is important for the sprints? What should they do there? So another thing that we've done is that we skip meeting memos. We do not have meeting memos anymore. You create your meeting in this system as well. Any action that comes out of a meeting is of course created as a task, similar to everything else. You just tell that task that it was created in this meeting, and then if somebody actually wants a meeting memo, it can actually be auto-generated, so the system can output. So this is our basic template for meetings, but instead of, and it will list all the actions that was agreed upon on that meeting, but this is actually not tasks in its stupid document, it's actually tasks in the database. So that way, and I think that's the very important part of this, include everybody and everything. Because first of all, if you manage some tasks really efficiently in this system, and then you have another task list that you're not prioritizing in the same way, your design is going to be aligned, so you're not doing the right things at the right time. And secondly, if you do not involve everybody, the client, the architect, the suppliers, if there's something critical in that way, in every project where we didn't involve somebody, we were always challenged with these guys because they were not in the loop of this dynamic reprioritization of what to do when. And as it was explained before, you need to include the design team if you want to do a collaborative design. So what are the advantages of doing this? Well, first of all, the feedback is that you get a very strong visual overview of your design process, what's going on, just similar to any other board like this. You get an increased team involvement because people actually have a very defined task, and it's very easy for them to understand what they have to do when. And this continuous prioritization ensures that you might reprioritize, but things are not disappearing just because you decide that it's not important this week. It might be more important 2 weeks later. It's not disappearing. It's still there. It's just reprioritized. And then I think the last one is very important, that we see that we get more empowered teams, because we ask the team to be involved much more. So they are part of this visual planning session, and whatever they decide in that visual planning session is reflected straight into Jira. So they kind of like they feel that the work they put into this visual planning is actually very effectively output it into something that is being done every day in the project then. But there's also challenges, and I think first of all, design projects are very changing in nature. I think that the design projects that I tested on was also, it's like pharmaceutical laboratory design buildings, so it's very complex buildings with complex clients. But for example, this project, this is a graph showing, so the orange one is the tasks created, the blue ones are the tasks who are in progress, and the purple one are the tasks that are completed. So the project started in January, it was stopped 3 times in periods, because either the client was in doubt of whether he needed or not, or if he should spend more money on it and so on. But I think the interesting thing is that we could quite easily start straight off again, because we knew where the project was stopped and where we should continue from. But I think there's also another challenge in this, is that we experience a very low, we call it PPC, which is like the amount of issues that you actually say we will do in a week. How many of those did you actually complete in that week? And that was in many weeks below 50. So in some weeks, of course, above, but in many weeks that ratio was below 50%. If that was a construction site, that would be something terribly wrong. But I think the mentality in design is like, this is how it's always been. I didn't get the information that I needed from a supplier, so I cannot solve this task, even though I know I should. And I was asking them continuously, shouldn't you reprioritize your task? You have so many tasks that you need to do next week. You can't do it, but are you sure you shouldn't say that some of this have to wait till next week? And they were always saying, no, we need to do all this week, but they didn't do it anyway. So it's quite an interesting observation, because I think design projects are definitely broken, because the feedback from this one was that this was actually better. They were experienced that people, the client and so on, were resolving issues a lot faster than normally. So this picture is better than before. And I think it comes to another scary point, because we have some managers who are very frustrated with that some of our projects fail big time, and some of our projects are going okay. And it's very difficult to track which ones are failing and which ones are not. So this is typically the development, the size or the man load on a larger design project. So you start the project off with a few people, and then more and more people get involved. And when you deliver the design, you probably reach 60 people in a large project. So on some of our projects, we then experience that quite soon you start to decrease the amount of people on the project, because the drawings are sent out, there's not so much to do. But in some of our projects, we have a very hard time, because there was a ton of mistakes in the project. It can't be built. It doesn't the systems doesn't do what they were supposed to do, and so on. And if you ask each of those 2 design managers, the red and the blue one here, are your project on track? Is it on time? And is it okay? And they will all, every time they say yes here. So it's very difficult for our managers to spot the projects that are going to run over budget. And I think it's because of this, because in some projects, they are just postponing so many issues or clarification in challenges, so they do not resolve it. They base the whole design mostly on the assumptions, and they forget that there was assumptions in many times. So with this kind of graph, we believe that we can actually track if these 2 are not meeting when we deliver the design. That gap there is going to cause us trouble for sure. So it's a lot more interesting to prove, because this can be a potential huge loss on a project. We always budget the blue one, I can tell you that. So it's a big surprise when the project are not following that plan. So what's happening on a project where we do this? Well, this is typically the organization in our design projects. And the design manager is the guy who's responsible for people doing the right thing. He usually experiences himself as this. He sees himself as the officer that has to tell everybody what they have to do almost every day, because otherwise they're not doing it, or they do it what they think that is right, and it's definitely not. So what's happening now? Well, I find it hard to explain to them, but he's actually turning into like this sheepdog. And what is a sheepdog? It's a dog that's not telling the sheep what to do, but ensuring that no sheep is running away in the wrong direction, but ensuring that everybody's on track all the time. So if you have a good other metaphor of explaining what they are. I like to hear it because they don't like to be called sheepdogs, but it's actually what's happening because they see that they can take a step back, and instead of telling people what to do all the time, and it's very dependent on their knowledge and ensuring that the design is on track, people themselves can tell what they think is important, and this design manager can just manage that everybody's following that track that they just agreed upon. And they do this by monitoring continuously this board. And of course, if a discussion shows up, like I have never heard about that. We had a funny case. The client tells us that he never heard that he was supposed to do some environmental and safety inspection himself. And we were like, we told you 2 weeks ago, and he was like, never heard about it. And you can actually just, of course, Google this and say, okay, environmental and health issues, and it showed up that 2 weeks ago there was an issue, like who should do environmental and health on this issue, and the client replied, I do it myself, don't worry about it, and off it went. And of course it's very easy to then show him later, well, you just said 2 weeks ago that you're going to do it yourself. So it turns a lot of discussion off, and it actually improves the collaboration, because there's not all these arguments that you can. In the old days you could just say, I never heard about that, and there could be a huge argument about this. It's much more transparent now. It's also a challenge, but it's definitely there's more wins than takes from being transparent. I think I'm gonna skip this one and just say don't take Agile Scrum and use it directly as they do it in software engineering, because buildings are different. In software you can release a version 1.1 if you missed something or failed in some way. It's very hard to do a 1.1 of a building, so we need to change a little bit. And I'm gonna what we experienced is that you probably know Last Planner was also what the Skanska and Veidekke was using. What we just changed a little bit is some of the terms. So instead of phase scheduling, we have backlog prioritization. Instead of look-ahead planning, we have the sprint planning, and instead of the weekly workup meetings, we have stand-up meetings. So not running, it's very similar to Lean, but there's a slight difference, and I think it is that we do not plan so carefully ahead, but we are using more time to evaluate what we learned along the way and then adjust the plan continuously. And the last thing, maybe we should say that, we discussed yesterday with all the gentlemen here that this is a pretty good picture of the challenge that you're in. So you have traditional plan-driven design, where you have a lot of control of your design. The challenge is it assumes that you have a very clear clarity of solution, and that you do not have many iterations. Design is something else, especially in the early stage. Even though there's a client specification, probably there's a lot of questions to it, and there's a lot of learning from when you start the design. So the design development should probably start being very agile, and then probably at the end, when you fixed a lot of stuff, end to be more plan-driven. I would just say that in all of these projects, we are here at all times. We never get down here because the client and everybody is changing along the way. So it's very difficult in our large projects to get to this where everything is fixed and now we can just all work on our design. So that was a few insights into a very similar approach, but more digital approach maybe.
Thank you. So what do the lawyers think of not having the minutes of the meeting? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but we had the list of everything. Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions? Kordan, et võib ka eesti keeles küsida, jah?
Hey, is Jira good enough? I mean, it is developed for software developers. Is it good enough for designers? Do you miss something? Do you need something more?
We were discussing yesterday, I think we should start up a software company doing software for design management and construction. You will definitely be able to make a lot of money if you understand the whole process. You need to be listening very carefully to also what Veidekke and Skanska said, because there's many levels to this. It's just not about putting some task into a database. There's the whole change management process, the relation between tasks and everything like that. Jira is very powerful. The way we implemented was turning off like probably 70 or 80% of the functionality and just started very basically. and it works. It works fine. It can be used, but there's definitely improvement potential as well.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, so thank you again. And